the time to give some period hair techniques a try when no one is going to see you except for the people you live with. So that's something that, like, maybe give a thought to before you dismiss some things, because some of the things, like I said, especially to modern people, are really weird. And I will try to remember to mention when those hygiene or bathing norms changed, if I'm aware, but sometimes they're just weird. I'm gonna move this a little bit. There we go. It's allergies. It's not the coronavirus, promise. All right, so I have a list of sources, and the one that I most encourage you to do from a practical standpoint is the third one. It is a list, or is a link to a YouTube playlist of videos by a woman named Janet Stevens. She's actually a hairdresser by trade, but she, as a hobby, started digging into how to recreate historical hairstyles that she saw in artwork. The Ornatrix school, it sounds like something kind of adult, but that just means that it's a female job. So a woman who fixes hair is what an Ornatrix is. It's not anything adult. But she has amazing videos about how to do all kinds of hairstyles, from ancient Greece all the way up to the 19th century. And they're really amazing. And a lot of the techniques that I'm going to be talking about come from there. So I want to go through our list of tools and kind of explain them to you before I dive in. So if you start to become a hygiene nut like I am, and not really, but for my SCA stuff, and I will tell you that this got started because I am perpetually late to things. I'm very bad at mornings. So I would always show up with my hair undone and with no makeup on, anything like that. And I decided I would start delving into the history of those things so I could start doing a demo every time I was didn't show up to an event with enough time to get all fixed up ahead of time. And it's been really fun, so I've stuck with it. But you will start accumulating a collection of combs, and you'll see what I mean in just a second. So this is the most, I say, like, the most classically medieval comb. They were made out of all kinds of different, other than the fact that gum printing on it, here we go, better side. They were made out of all kinds of materials. This one is wood, but they are also made from bone, carved from ivory, metal, horn. Metal is the least common, but wood was very common, and especially accessible for everyone to have. If you were very wealthy, you would want to have an ivory comb or a bone carved comb or horn, because horn is naturally anti-static. But this style of comb with a double side, this is the most common style of historical comb from until like the later Renaissance time. So this is a more recognizable comb. They did have combs like this, absolutely, but they just weren't as common as your double-sided comb. This one is horn. It looks like plastic, but it's horn. And horn is fun because it's kind of like the plastic of the historical era. It is naturally anti-static if that is an issue for your hair. If you look at these combs and you're thinking, I cannot fit that through my hair, you should go out and find a wide tooth comb, because the comb is like the one absolutely necessary hygiene tool. It wasn't just about straightening and fixing your hair, it was also about cleaning it by actually scraping some of the oils and dirts on, by actually scraping some of the dirt and oils and things out of your hair with like frequent and not excessive, but more combing than we would necessarily do just to get the tangles out. I also have this really pretty elaborately carved comb because it feels nice to have pretty things to make yourself pretty with. That's why. And then I also have this horn comb. Combs were a traditional gift between lovers, and this one has ducks on it. They're Asian ducks, but ducks were considered a sign of love because they mate for life. Isn't that beautiful? Okay. So I'm going to, I'll actually use my double-sided. Okay, so the next thing on the list is what's called a gravois, and it is a crazy fancy French word for what's just a hair stick. It does need to be something that is smooth, so when you're running it through your hair, it doesn't catch, because what the gravois is used for is to actually part your hair. And it can be any kind of hairpin. Actually, anytime you see a hairpin sold as a single, it's not a hairpin, it's technically a gravois. And that is just a fancy French word that means hair parter. So when we're doing the braids to make them nice, part of making them very nice and very clean is having a very nice, clean separation of hair when you're parting, and the gravois makes that easier than your fingers. Your fingers work fine, but this works better. Tool. I have bodkins that I use, not in the sense for threading things, but in the sense of using them to hold, like using a spiked metal bodkin to like stab through and hold things in place. I use just these double-sided knitting needles. I want to get some bigger ones, but my hair is honestly very fine and doesn't, like, it's so easy to restrain. So these work just fine for my hair. And you're also, this is not something where you're putting all your hair up all day. This is something for putting up parts of your hair for a few minutes. This is like your extra hand. Okay, so sorry, there's things popping up. So these just hold, this is like the extra hand that holds some of the hair while you're working with the rest of it. So while you're doing a braid on this side, you can loop up your hair and put it up. With the style I'm demonstrating today, I may not, because I'm very used to wrangling my hair for it. But in general, even if I forget to use them, these are very handy, especially if you're gonna get into some more elaborate Roman hairstyles, which are elaborate. And also later period hair taping and things like that. The bodkins become very useful. Okay, so for a needle, a nail binding needle will work great for this. I have this awesome little tiny pocket size nail binding needle that I received as largesse, and this one works really well. You can see this is my hair yarn. This was originally a horn stylus that came with a tablet, a wax tablet I bought. This is actually the best hair sewing needle that I have. It's got a good, nice length. It has a blunt tip, because you don't want to actually stab your head. That's not the purpose. It only needs to be going through your hair. It has a nice blunt tip. It's nice and chunky, which means it can have a nice, huge eye for getting the yarn through. So that's something, if you're going to make something on your own, just make a big old honking eye on it, because you're going to be sticking yarn through this. You can't use like string or something smaller. You really need to use yarn to match the texture of your hair. So I have just a bunch of yarn, and this is just a simple little knot here, like a slip knot, and then when you want to form the base of your knot, you stick it through like that, and that's your first knot to start your anchor. So I just actually kind of preload my hair needles, and then when I want usually someone else to do my hair, I'm like, oh, it's all ready to go. You don't even have to worry about it. And it's usually easier to like trick them at that stage. But I have lots. I went out to the store and I literally like stuck my head near a bunch of yarn, and I picked out one that matched the color of my hair. And then I went home and I immediately like just took it and made it into small little bundles that I could further break down and do your hair. And even with, I have a lot of hair. I have a lot of hair, but even with a lot of hair, it doesn't, especially because my hair is very thin, it doesn't take a lot of yarn for each style. So you'll end up with more than you think you will. You'll end up with more than you think you will after you're done. Okay, so those are the basic tools. We are also going to be using some things. We're going to be putting oil on our hair, and we're going to be doing a hair powder, which can be any kind of powdered herb or fragrant thing that you like the smell of, honestly. Most of it is about the fact that it smells nice. There's not really a lot of other parts to it. So don't get hung up on getting exactly the right thing, or if you really hate roses or something, you can absolutely replace the roses with jasmine flowers or lemongrass or just anything else. The main thing is you want to make sure that you're okay with putting it on your skin. So if you have very sensitive skin, you might want to like not have a lot of clove powder in it, minimize that. I do have a recipe that I'm included on the handout for the hair powder, which I have made from the 12th century Trotula document. That is a very simple perfume, like powdered perfume. Those were very common. They were usually a byproduct of the more expensive oil-based perfume making process. So they were pretty accessible to people, or at least significantly more accessible than those perfumed oils. Okay. The first thing, and this is one of the things that people really are just like, oh my God, what? Is that it works better if you wash your hair at least every 4 days and at most every 30 days. So that means not more than every four days. And I know that that sounds really horrifying to a lot of modern people. We're used to bathing every day. We're used to thinking of that as being the norm. But actually, throughout most of human history, even if you were wealthy, you might bathe every day. If you lived in a time when there was public bathing that was accessible to everyone, like Rome, you would bathe probably every day or frequently, but you might not actually wash your hair. If you look at bathing women in portraits, almost always, if they are respectable ladies, they may be completely nude, but they will have their hair covered because they weren't washing their hair every time they bathed. Washing your hair was a separate task. Bathing your body and washing your hair, separate things. So that's part of why, even if you might be bathing every day, you're not washing your hair every day. But throughout a lot of human history, bathing every day was not normal. As recently as the 20s, it was the cultural norm to bathe once a week. And that really just freaks people out. But so I have been not washing my hair for a few days. I actually, as a general practice, don't wash my hair as much as modern folks usually do, because I feel like it keeps my hair healthier, but that's a personal choice and everybody makes their own. And if you see me saving my little bits of hair, it is for another medieval hair project that I'm working on that if we have enough time, I will talk to you about. So to start with, you have a more textured, grabby hair than you would in a modern context with a freshly washed. And that is part of what keeps what helps the styles fit in better. And it's also what makes the braids look nicer. And it's also what makes that super classic, like perfectly waved hair where all the waves align. Part of why that is drawn that way is it is oiled hair that has been recently unbraided. And if you try these hair techniques and you try an actual like early Middle Ages hairstyle with braids, when you undo your hair, you will see that classic early medieval female look of the mermaid waves. It's very beautiful, but it is actually, and I can assure you this, I've done it many times, and every time I'm like, oiled hair recently unbraided, looks exactly like that. Okay, so we're gonna comb, and I'm gonna just briefly go over this because I recently was reminded by a friend of mine who has very long hair that they had no idea how to actually comb their hair without just ripping everything out. So they always used a brush. Well, this is how. You start at the bottom and you work your way up in little bits. You also hold just above it to avoid hurting your head. And if this is old news for you, that's okay. But if there's one person I can help learn how to take better care of their hair without hurting themselves, because you shouldn't suffer for beauty. It's worth it. So I'm just kind of quickly working through. I won't lie, I did do a quick comb out earlier just because I had like waking up bedhead. And there's a lot of combing in this process. Historically, you would probably have a maid if you were someone who is wealthy enough to be putting your hair up in this kind of style, whether male or female. You would probably have a maid or a valet of some type, and they would be helping you. So it was normative to comb, like we have that whole brush your hair 100 strokes. I'm not saying 100 strokes was normal, but it was normal to comb your hair quite a bit, just because of what I mentioned before. It does actually scrape some of the oils and the dirts caught in those oils out of your hair by using the right size tooth comb for your hair texture. And that is an important part of the process. Okay, so we've got our first comb in. Don't worry, we'll come back to that. This is hair powder, just so you know what I'm digging at. This is the recipe that's included from the Trotula in the handout. It's perfectly fine if you don't have that already. You could be using powdered rosemary from your cabinet and it will work just fine. But just so you can hopefully see, it's just some powder. All right, so this is a trick. And lots of people are like, when I talk to them about hair powder, they're completely confused about how it works. Here's how it works. You make little furrows in your hair, and then you sprinkle hair powder in. And yes, you will have fallout in these application stages. Okay, now kind of gently massage it in. You're not scratching your scalp. That's super bad for your scalp. You're gently massaging it in, which actually is stimulating for your scalp, so it helps with hair growth. And some of the ingredients in this may help with that as well. Cloves may stimulate, I'm using May, big fat May, your scalp as well by increasing blood flow. And also the watercress in the recipe has an association going back to Roman times with hair growth. So you just rub it in until you're not getting any more fallout from it. And you can see it's better the more finely powdered it is, the better. So grind it very fine, and even possibly grind it with some water, or you can grind it with some scented water if you want to make something fancy. And let that get it very, very fine and let it dry out. And then you can get a nice, very fine aromatic perfume powder to put in your hair. You can also sprinkle it on things. You can sprinkle it on fabrics. You can sprinkle it in your bed. It was actually something that was very decadent and like exotic, sort of boho, to sleep in your perfume by sprinkling it in your bed. Fun times. Okay, so we've got our powdered perfume on. Next thing we want to do is start sectioning our hair with our hair powder. Shout out to Known World Courtesans, Golden Heart. I am going to look at the video and use it as a mirror. Although I have done this without a mirror. It's just better if you have one. So for the style I'm going to do today, I'm going to do a simple Norman braid, 3-strand braid on each side. There are 3 different braids that are used in medieval contexts for hair. I'm only going to be demonstrating the one because it's the simplest and the one we're most familiar with. So if you're following along, it's the easiest to follow along with. But it does not hurt to educate yourself if you want to get fancy and if you really love hair stuff and aren't just someone who can't show up on time. Then there is a 4-strand braid that is basically a purely medieval kind of braid. And then you can do inward braid, which we're used to, but outward braid was also used historically. So I'm just getting my hair nice and separated. Okay, so this is one of those hint situations. To modernly make a braid, we part it this way, right? And that makes a braid that lays down and faces out, away from our head. Now, in historical artwork, in historical depictions, they do not face outward. They face forward. Everything is forward oriented. So it's important to keep that in mind because that changes actually how we divide our hair. So, I came here for a mirror, but it's actually screwing me up. It's okay. Now, if you don't get this perfect, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And it does take a little bit of time getting used to parting your hair with the different orientation. Oh, and here I was worried I wouldn't remember to use bodkins. Okay. Just an extra hand. This is when having a longer gravoire is useful and better than your finger because I can actually push it all the way back through my hair. Okay. Then when I want this hair back, biggity bam. Okay, so I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're so uneven. It's okay. It's okay. So I like to start by having this top one go back behind for the first braid. I just think it looks nice and it uses the hair to kind of restrain itself. Now, make sure not to pull too far out to the side because then when they lay down, they'll lay like this. You want to be moving the hair into the position you want it to actually lay in as much as possible. And this is where, if someone else was doing this for me, they would probably section out all my hair, bodkin it up, and then start braiding. But I'm just doing it for myself. So I just jump in. Okay. Get in a few good braids, like a few good passes. Now, this one is super tiny. I'm sure you can see it's super tiny. So next time I bring it in, I'm going to steal a bunch of hair from the back of this ginormo one. Maybe not that much. I'm going to push it over to this one. This takes practice, folks. Don't be hard on yourself if the little switcheroo part takes a while for you to get the hang of. getting the braids to face forward and getting them to be even looking the way they are in artwork are probably the two hardest parts. So don't, give yourself lots of time to practice that. And you keep doing it. So this one feels smaller again. So I just take a little bit of hair from the back. And you don't want to overestimate. I mean, as much as it doesn't hurt, you don't want to overestimate because then you just have to trade it back. And it's not as important that it's super even up top, but when you get to the bottom, the glue works much more effectively if all of the strands are as even as possible. Yes, I did say glue, don't panic. Oh, wait, I forgot to apply my hair oil. That's okay, we'll just do it on the other side. All right. Okay, so hair oil. I actually waited to make this until I had you on camera because I wanted to show you how easy making a hair oil can be, especially in a modern context. Oh, I see the time now, so I'm gonna try to speed along. I literally just have regular olive oil. If you really hate the smell of olives, you could go with virgin olive oil, but extra virgin olive oil is most likely a scam. So I don't usually bother. Now, there's two ways you can scent it. You need an oil-based scent. That's very important. Alcohol-based, water-based won't work. One of those things, shout out to Pastimes. They have fantastic perfumes. They are oil-based, so if you want to crack them open underneath the ball and put a drop in your hair oil, that can be a great way to scent your hair oil. Or you can just use an essential oil or a skin-safe fragrance oil. Watch me. There we go. Okay, I was worried it was gonna be Evan proof, Gwlados proof. So this is just a little bit amount. So the slightest little drop. Since Rose is also very strong, I'm not allowed to open this in the same room as my partner. Scented hair oil. It's that easy. Okay, so the way that I do the oil is I just dip my fingers in. And this can be something that can oil on your clothes can make long-term stains. This was less of a concern historically, as far as I've seen, because scenting your clothes with oil perfume was a practice. So if you're already putting oil on them, oil marks will be minimized. So since that's not a thing I know how to do practically yet, something you can do is to put a towel out, a rag, or do this before you change into your day garb and only worry about getting oil on whatever night clothes you're wearing. I like to just be careful about my drips. So I just put it on my fingertips and work it through. I feel like the most important part to oil is right here where my braids tend to go the most like fuzzy. But a little bit of oil at the bottom is good for your hair. It's where your hair needs it the most, is at the bottom on the tips. So this is something I point out, especially when people ask me how I got my hair so long. If you're putting hair oil in every time you're going out for an event or practicing, getting your garb all set up, doing pictures at home, going to an online event, it doesn't matter what it's for. If you're oiling up your hair with perfumed oil every time you put your hair in a medieval hairstyle and you wear it all day, you're basically doing like an all-day hydrating oil mask for your hair. It's great for your hair. Okay. So then you want to comb again to distribute the oil. I may cheat a little bit on this just because you don't need to actually watch me comb that much. But nevertheless, it's better better to work it through. Don't do what I'm doing here because I'm doing it for a display. Take your time. It also smells so nice. And I gotta say, this is the other thing. When you take your hair down from having it scented with oil, that whole let me get comfortable has a whole like olfactory element to it, because when your hair comes down, no matter how long it's been, there's a little bit of that perfume molecule still in your hair, and it kind of floats out, it just wafts out. It's sexy. Ain't no other way to put it. And they talk about that in manuals. They talk about, and also in art, they talk about beautiful scented hair flowing in waves and all kinds of stuff like that. We already started here, so I'm just gonna get back to it. Oh, it fell down. That's okay. Pretty good at these. So if you lose your hold, go back to where it's nice and tight. That may seem like another one of those, obviously. Why are you telling me these silly things? Because there might be someone who doesn't know. So it's not super ideal that this middle one is just out of stuff to give to that smaller one. So I take a slightly larger amount than I think I need from that one. Sorry, I'm totally out of your range. From that one and move it over to the center one. Then I can move some of that one over to this one. I like to do at least one row of braids in between the different transfers, just because that keeps it from having like a weird bend or crookedness. You can make someone's braid crooked on purpose. It's nice vengeance. If you want to be petty, that's a thing. I've read a very interesting poem about that. So I'm just standing up so you can see me continue to braid. And you just continue to braid until the end of your hair. I'm going to show you a trick though for braiding your hair without a maid, which is a thing. I heard a very interesting discussion once about how to properly do our SCA life, we need to all get servants when we started. And then it's funny, but you know, impractical. All right, so what you can see is happening here is that I'm getting to the end of where I can keep appropriate tension on my braid and still have midget arms, the length of my midget arms. It's a big problem, but this point comes for everyone in the point of growing out your hair. You may not encounter it. A lot of people who have longer hair in the SCA use falsies, and that's totally legit. You would have probably started putting extensions in somewhere up here. And so you just keep braiding your extensions then, all the same. So I transitioned to holding it like this with my thumb on the back. So my thumbnail is towards myself. That holds the braid tight. Instead of keeping tension with my arm, that holds the braid nice and tight together because I keep my thumb on it. And then I use my other hand and then this one to flick them into the center. I'll try to make sure I'm framing this up for you. So there's my thumb. And once you get good enough at that transition, you won't even have a weird crookedy part. Okay, so this is at the point where if it's particularly uneven, you want to start getting it even. The other thing about holding it this way, I grab it with this finger, is I keep these very far apart so they're very distinct. This is the part where you want to really start focusing on getting the different strands nice and even. And you'll notice
if you can do that good enough, you can actually just seamlessly go down to the point where you're braiding 3 hairs together. Now, modernly, we like to get our hair nice and cut, but historically, they liked the look of that braid getting thinner. That was the aesthetic. They liked the uneven hair that we work very hard not to have. It's part of why I don't cut my hair very often. I think that's probably just because the longest hair possible was fashionable. And I think to a certain extent because it showed that you had been well taken care of and had taken care of yourself for a very long time. Because this is the thing about healthy hair. If you are sick, if you have a major illness, if you experience a time of malnutrition, your hair will reflect that. And so you can actually literally see the length of time someone has been healthy when you can see the length of their hair. And especially in a more reproduction-oriented culture, perhaps, that might be a very important visual cue. It's a little bit like the girls with heavily embroidered skirts showing them off while they're dancing so that they can show off how good of a homemaker they can be. Okay. This one is getting a little uneven. And this is why you want to get really focused on it before, because at this point, you are literally just transferring like a single, I'm going to just try to go with it. You're literally just transferring a single hair at a time. So you want to pay attention to that in like the last 10 inches. It depends on, my hair has a very long, thin tail because of the aforementioned historical cutting practices. You want to go until you literally cannot even with the hairs. Okay. Now, what I have here, I can't really show it to you, but I have a little dish here and it is full of egg whites. And a lot of people get grossed out by this point, but this is, I think, probably the most likely conjectural sort of historical hair gel solution that I've come across. You can also make flaxseed hair gel. There are recipes for it all over the internet. I like to make that. I like to make it with scented water, and I like to take that for longer events. But for one-day events or events where I have access to refrigeration, I will almost always just use egg whites because I don't have to make it and it's fine. It does not smell on the first day. It does not smell if you have a really thorough gluing thing. It does not smell on the second day, okay? It doesn't. And the thing is, the more complex your hairstyle, the more later period, the medieval hairstyles, and some of the earlier Roman hairstyles are more elaborate, and you want to be gluing more of your hair, like up to and including just covering your hair and then starting to put it in the hairstyle. That's not required for the Norman braid, but depending on how durable you want it to be, it can be required. And it does not look sticky and gross. There's not white powder. I've tested this. So what I do to glue up my hair is I just start with the tip and I just stick it in there. If you have like a bottle, you can use a bottle and just shove several inches of your braid into the egg white. It seems disgusting. Yeah, it seems disgusting. I know. I'm totally like with you on that. Squeeze it out. Obviously, you want to be having some sort of tray or something, or make sure the ground's okay to get egg whites on. Make sure you don't get on your clothes. The other reason you might be a little more careful about this, and when you apply it in your dressing stage, and you may change at what stage you get dressed versus doing your hair, because when it's wet, it will flop on your garb and leave wet marks, but it dries, and the albumin is not flaky or anything, so it just dries and it doesn't matter. Also, when it dries in your hair is not super stiff. So I just kind of run my hand down, and I move my hand up a little bit further up the braid every time I squish down until I feel it really starting to dry and soak in. And I have egg whited my hair and put enough oil in that the braid has still looked nice enough on day 2 that I'm just like, let's roll. So at this point, it probably is pretty hard to tell what the point of adding the oil is. But I will tell you that it becomes apparent the longer you go in the day. The oil helps keep it looking like nice and sleek. It also helps with split ends in the long term. So it helps keep it looking nice and sleek, like instead of getting those little popping out hairs. The better you oil it, and like obviously there's always too much of a good thing, but the more you oil it, the less you'll have those blowouts. And that's why I say I particularly focus on getting like this section of my hair oiled in the braid, because that's the section that gets moved around, from my headgear, my shoulder, my head turning all about and up and every which way while I'm talking to people. So that I focus on this area for the oil, and then probably about the bottom, whenever it starts to get significantly narrower, the bottom little bit, because that practically needs more conditioning, and this practically needs more stuff to keep it in place. I have just a little bit more time, so I actually have basically covered things instead of going on to do this. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on how to implement this, and or ideas into your hygiene routine? I'm happy to brainstorm with you as well.
I wanted to ask you about, I don't like the smell of coconut oil except for in my food. So like, I mean, can I use coconut oil instead of olive oil? Because I don't like olive oil like on me all the time. Gwen does it, and I think it's kind of yucky.
You can use literally any kind of oil you like. It doesn't have to be anything. I used olive oil in my demo today just to show you that you can literally just go into your kitchen and get oil. You don't even have to scent it if you don't want to. But yeah, coconut oil is fine. Almond oil, sesame oil, any kind of oil that is compatible with your hair and your skin, and that you want to put in your hair. And it's scent the same. You know, that should be something you like and you're okay having around. But I do caution you not to put too much scent, because you can actually, by exposing yourself to the same scent all the time, make yourself go scent blind. And you can protect yourself from that by using a more subtle level, which also your fellow Scadians will appreciate.
Yeah, I think there should be a serving size on modern perfume, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I feel like for topical application, that's perfectly acceptable for essential oil and for fragrance oil without getting skin irritation. And it also conveniently keeps the amount of perfume or scent people are able to douse on to a small and acceptable minimum. Oop.
Also, I wanted to know, I've heard that if you put orange oils or citrus oils on your skin, it can cause problems with the sun. Is that the same in your hair or no?
Yeah, it is. And actually, so you can take advantage of that. If you'd like to do a subtle lightening of your hair, you can use a citrus oil in your hair, and that includes bergamot. Bergamot, most people don't think about that, but that does include bergamot. It does not include lemongrass.
I did not know that.
I'm happy to help.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for those of us that have bangs or curly hair? Is there anything we can do in particular?
So if you want to just get rid of your bangs, like disguise them, what I would do is to I would use the whatever gel I'm using to kind of just slick them back, like just comb them back into my hair. Once I saturate them with the gel, comb them back, and kind of disappear them. If you want to keep your bangs, if you think they look flattering on your face, like, do it. You should always dress so that you feel good about yourself. But what I would do then is probably curl them. The curled or wavy look is more the aesthetic that we're going for. So maybe even like a wave, do a heat wave before you go to events. So just so your bangs have that not so modern look to them. I would definitely try to break up that sort of like straight, blunt, modern hair aesthetic that we're very into. I would do something to sort of break that up.
Okay.
All right.
There was a question in the chat box.
Oh, yes, please.
The yarn you showed, what would you be using for that in your braids?
So the yarn I have is actually an acrylic, just because I felt like that matched my hair the best. You can use anything, although if your hair gets very tangly, especially mine does, especially if I'm not washing it as often. So I don't use wool because wool can actually end up getting stuck in your hair. But if you have very like slippery hair that doesn't tangle too much, wool is a good choice. Cotton is always a good choice. You want just enough texture that it gets grabby with your hair and not so much that it's going to get permanently entangled in your hair, if that makes sense. The acrylic has been really good, but I also have used, like I said, I've used cotton, I've used, I don't know, I've used a bunch of different random kinds of yarn. So I don't think the fiber of the yarn matters so much as the match of your texture and color. Oh, so in this style, the yarn isn't as important, but the purpose of the yarn is if you're doing something that needs a foundation of a ponytail. Oh my gosh, hair everywhere. If you're doing something that needs a foundation of a, like a ponytail, you get your hair all set up, and I'll demonstrate here, even though this one doesn't need it. And you get your hair in the situation that you want it in. Stitch through. So this is more of a later period or earlier period Roman for the more elaborate hairstyles. Just go through your little hole that you started. So now it's nice and anchored. And then wrap it around. Keep it nice and tight. Go through a couple more times. Keep the needle going in between the yarns and your hair. Oof. More tail would have been handy, but it's not the end of the world. Okay. So then I have a nice strong ponytail base. So if you're doing like you want to do like an updo, you would put your hair up just like you normally would for a ponytail, except for instead of using a ponytail holder, you would stitch it and actually sew your hair in place. I'm just gonna stick that there for now. So then you just tie it off. It's really nice and simple. Another way that I have found to do ponytails is I made these wacky hair ties. And for this, I do use wool because it's very gribby, but I just loosen it a length and then I leave a bit on both ends, and they're slightly elastic because they're lucided. They're very grippy for hair. So I just tie those on nice and tight, use the needle to stitch them back through, and that makes a really good sort of ponytail holder as well. All right, that's my time. My email address, I hope I put it on the handout. If not, hit me up. I'm happy to answer questions and talk fashion and beauty anytime. And thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. It was great.
I always wondered how you got your hair so shiny.
Oil. And it's really good for your hair too. It really is. Like that's part of what I tell people, and they're like, how do you get your hair so long? Laziness and oil.
I can definitely do the laziness part.
The laziness is the easiest part. Oh, and it's technically after class time, that's fine. This is the crazy medieval thing. I'm still working on fully documenting it, but I'm making a ball of my hair to use inside my hairstyles to bulk them up. So this is my crazy, it's called a rat. And this is weird in modern practice, but it was a super normal thing for ladies to do. They actually, like in the Victorian era, they talk about ladies like, oh, at least I have my hair in my box. I've been saving it. So fun times.
How long did it take you to grow your hair?
That is a very hard question to answer. I haven't formally cut it in over a decade, a really long time. I just don't cut my hair.
So that's the main. Gosh, I don't know. It's since college, since 2099,
You
something
don't
like that.
say the college date. That's good.
So, and then I also have these scissors for cutting stuff out of my hair.
Do you need that a lot?
Oh yeah, when you sew it, you have to cut it out usually. But it also stays up for like, you can put it up and it just stays for like days. It's fantastic. Yeah, like I did my not good. I need to cut it out. Actually, I'm gonna go and have Randy cut it out because he can see it. I want to cut my hair. Thank you guys for coming. This has been awesome. Bye.
The next class in here is silk banner making, and so you're welcome to stay or you are welcome to run off. Either one.